Lights. Can you turn those two lights on over there? You get quite a sinister looking picture here. Hello, Haima.
Namaste, Swamiji. Good evening.
Ooh, it is a good evening.
You got a good weather there.
Well, inside.
Oh, okay. That's how it is here. It's very heavy winds today. 60 miles per hour in airport winds.
Is there snow on the ground?
No, I don't see anything in my area where I'm close 10 miles to airport. But
Okay.
other areas probably closer to mountain like Boulder and all that may have. They said that. But the winds are very heavy today. 70 miles per hour in some areas.
Well, if you could have them stop by tomorrow at evening.
I wish we could. I think tomorrow is much better. Yeah, tomorrow is much better.
When I land the plane.
Yeah, that's right. My screen says recording. Are you recording in your
No, this is the Atlanta Zoom account, and they have their settings to record automatically.
I see.
We don't do that because we start 15 minutes early usually.
Yeah.
I don't want anybody's deepest, darkest secret recorded.
That's right.
All right, shall we start? Okay. Start our chant here. I'm out of Jyoti tells me to read the beginning too. Our meeting begins with a recollection of our relation to the universal being and our purpose here. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karava Bahaye Tejasvinavadi Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahaye. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the divine being may we have the strength and skill to study together in the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace be unto us all. All right. So all of you tuning in from Colorado, I guess it's you, Haima. We're going to start doing that chant, I think. All right. Well, I'd like to take the casual approach tonight and just kind of recap what we've done, just briefly go over it. And we'll cover some verses here on the Atman to close it out. It's the last, how many verses? 12 through 18. So the last 6 verses of the Katha Upanishad here to close it out. But you know, it's very important to know that you have never read this before. The problem quite often with having a past, present, and a future is that we make wrong assumptions. And one of those wrong assumptions is that when we read something that we remember having read before, we think, oh, we've read it before. And basically then we let our first reading be our understanding of it because we don't pay close enough attention. There was I think I've shared about him a few times. As you know, I'm a repetitious Swami. And early on, Swami, not Swami, but Sri Ramakrishna told the story of a sadhu whose whole sadhana, his only practice was to stand in front of a waterfall all day long and say, "Ah, how beautiful." His practice was to see that beauty for the first time again, over and over and over again, and not to let the wonder and the beauty and the awe of it become ordinary, become mundane, because that's how we go to sleep. And that's why all of the sages, all of the incarnations are always saying, arise, awake, wake up. And then Ramakrishna makes it even more, adds a little flavor to it by saying, if you were really asleep, it'd be easy to wake you up, But if you're pretending to sleep, well, it's very difficult to wake somebody up who's pretending to sleep, right? And made me think of that. There was a YouTube video. This is just for entertainment, I apologize, but there was a YouTube video of a little boy who was pretending to sleep. And the dad was pretending to be on the phone, and he was saying, he's like, doctor, my son is asleep. I can't seem to wake him up. And so he says, what is that? I should lift his arm up, and if he's really asleep, it will stay up when I let go. That's how I can tell if he's really asleep. Oh, let me try. He reaches down and lifts the boy's arm up. And of course, the boy holds the arm up in the air. So, this is how it is for us. We get into a story. I love the idea of a movie. I'm just going to go forward with the things coming into my mind. If you've heard it before, just tell me. But that we experience, when you experience a movie, you are really the movie, quite literally, because all you're watching is still frames, one after another, and a soundtrack, which doesn't necessarily have to do anything with the movie itself. And you watch that movie not by being present, but by remembering the previous frame, than the one that's on the screen right now. You sit on the edge of that last frame, and you look at the current frame, and you see difference because you are holding in your mind an idea that doesn't match your current reality. And so the mind creates a story that says, it moved. And so you experience movement that is not there, right? It makes it move. And so that's the first point, because the ultimate reality of this moment is that it is the unchanging reality, the absolute unchanging. There is no change. But what happens is we sit on the edge of our memory and we look at the current moment. We see difference from what's in the mind, and the mind creates a story, and that story we call egoism. And that story is what keeps you involved in the movie, right? It keeps everything moving. It then sees shapes when you're sitting there watching the film. You see shapes, and the mind sees that arrangement of color and say, hey, that's a man. And hey, that's a woman, right? Not because they aren't. They're just color on a white screen. That's the reality of it. And they're not moving, but it sees them on the screen. So it defines a man and a woman who aren't really there. And it sees them moving. And that brings up a memory, right? It goes into their past. And from the past, they pull up times when in their life, a man and a woman have been together. And oh, look, she just hit him. Oh, there's a fight happening. So you see how you dig that while you're watching the movie, you're constantly referencing your own memory to explain what the mind is interpreting as real on the screen, and all the same time creating movement, creating narrative, aligning the sound story with what you're watching on the screen. And then you say, oh my gosh, she hit him, and now she's stomping off. And oh my gosh, he dropped the flowers that he had brought to give her. She must not want those flowers. You see, all of this is assumption. Your mind is providing the story from your own experience and giving meaning to things that have no meaning whatsoever, because there is no movement and there's no change. There's only color on a white screen. And so you are the movie. And by the end of the movie, you find yourself weeping for something that never happened. You find yourself deeply involved, deeply engrossed. You can be angry, you can be sad, you can be horrified, you can be terrified. But why? It's a hypnosis created by you referencing your own memory to explain the change from one frame to the next, assigning that story to it, and then identifying with the story by placing yourself in that position, right? Oh, his girlfriend just left him and he dropped the flowers on the ground. And oh, Sally, I remember that happening. And then you're weeping, right? Oh God, that really hurt. And so you then assign emotions, which are nowhere in the experience at all. That movie's not conveying anything emotional whatsoever, but you are providing it. So at the end of the day, they should be paying you $15 because you are the movie, right? They're just a bunch of colored images flashing on a white screen. And so this is the reality of what we experience, this absolute unchanging moment, right? Does not move. There is no story here. You are everything, everywhere, all at once. I think there's a movie by that name, actually. And you say, well, how can that be? And then we touch on the dream, which I'll do quickly. You know, that in the dream at night, you are the whole movie. I mean, you are everything in that dream. It's in your head. And there's nothing, just like in a regular movie, there's nothing to give that meaning until Atman takes a particular perspective, you know, but it's an arbitrary perspective. It could be anything in that movie. Tonight, you could take the role of the man in the dream, and then, you know, play that same dream, and you could be the leaf on the tree, and you would see that dream tell a completely different story than the one that you saw when you were the man. And then you could be a drop of water in that dream. Exact same dream, but completely different narrative because you've identified with something, another particular in that dream. And so Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, I just read this a few weeks ago and it really hit me because he says, your attachment to your body is not the problem. The problem is that you've attached to only one body when you are all of them. And so in your dream, that's exactly how the dream happens also. You experience that narrative of that dream because you have arbitrarily chosen that particular perspective from which to view the dream. And you walk through that dream when the reality of your dream at night is that all of that is equally you, and your choice of that particular point of perspective was just absolutely arbitrary. There's no reason for it. And so the reality of the dream is that it's all you. But if you were everything in the dream at once, there would be no narrative. No narrative would be necessary because you would have all possible perspectives and you would know all the things that you would assume that would create a narrative. But you don't have to assume them because you're not the particular, and there is no slow unfolding of a narrative. It's just a flash that reveals everything all at once, unchanging. So that's the reality of our experience here. but it's a powerful hypnotization that we have. This egoism, we hold on to it white-knuckled. We don't want to let go of this idea of self, because actually we're terrified. At the deepest level, we're terrified because we are this particular, and we've got this ginormous unknown other. That's why in the Garden of Eden, that's the first thing they experienced there was their small, their vulnerability and their smallness. And they were terrified, so they hid from the divine. And that's what ignorance is. You know, hiding from the divine is ignorance. You're ignoring a truth that you're terrified to face. And just like in life, when you're terrified of facing something, you pull up an intoxicant of some kind, a book, a glass of wine, a friend, a trip, a cruise, something to distract you from the silent unknowing that is you, because you don't know its nature. You don't know what it is. Is it coming after me? Is it out for my good? I don't know. And so we're white knuckling this idea of being here, and we form an ego, a story, a narrative around it to maintain that sense of safety that we enjoy. It protects us from the unknown. We create plans, which is absurd. We have no idea what's going to happen. You know, everybody in Pompeii had a plan for tomorrow, and all of them thought that was somehow safe and that was somehow assured. They were all making the same assumptions that you and I make about every moment. But there was no tomorrow for them, that day anyway. And so that is our greatest fear. That's what keeps us really believing and holding on to the idea that I have a plan, I'm in charge, I can make this happen. And that is why we insist that we are the doer, when it is quite obvious that we are not the doer. Very rarely do your plans happen as you plan them. Most of the time, they're radically different than how you planned them. But your ego will keep adjusting its story to maintain the illusion that you're in charge, that you're the doer, you're safe, everything is fine. I got you, baby. Don't worry. But in fact, the ego is powerless and has no existence. Ramakrishna says, if you search for it, you will not find it. It's like peeling an onion. There's nothing there as you go through. So in this moment, we have to come to bring some matters of faith in. One, we have to stop white knuckling this idea that we're in danger, right? By understanding this, when the scriptures say this moment is that God is everywhere present and always perfect. That's the biggest key. You sit there and think about this moment. You want to experience this moment, so you bring it only to this moment. You forget the past. Don't let the past define the moment, because that's how desires happen. The past will create a desire for something that isn't in the moment. And then you have to create future and often in order to find that moment, or in order to manifest that object in the moment. So your past is your attachments, as we talked about on one of the days. Your future is your desires caused by those attachments. And you never experience the moment because you're always jumping from your attachments to your desires, to your attachments, to your desires. And the moment is just kind of there. You know, it becomes just a place to stand while you're remembering the past and running after a future. And so we try and do away with the past. That's our attachments, the things that we didn't want to let just flow. So you grab them and try to make them immortal by placing them in your memory so that you could have them whenever you wanted to think about them. Something in the moment touches your senses in a particular way, the smell of pizza, and suddenly the idea of pizza is in your mind. But oh my gosh, I'm in a temple in Georgia, there's no pizza. How am I going to get pizza? Then you have to plan. You project your future, make your plan, and then bring pizza into your moment. You'll enjoy the pizza and think that has made life perfect for you, because you've been distracted the whole time from the nature of the moment, which is step 2, coming to know that you are Satchitananda, that you are pure love, pure wisdom, and pure being. And in that knowledge, you gain that faith to be able to let go of your fear of what is happening, and you can start doing some exploring. You can do some experimenting inside. You take that notion that God is everywhere present and always perfect, and you remember that in the dream, okay, God is everywhere present. The moment is perfect. Now that's a tough one, because very rarely is the moment perfect. Very rarely do we sit down and be like, it's perfect. Everything's exactly right. Because even if everything appears perfect, you're still aging, right? And even though this moment's perfect, in about 20 minutes, the seat's going to hurt your butt, and suddenly that moment's not perfect anymore, even though nothing changed. It just went on too long, right? And so everything is always changing. So that forces you to go inside and find out, well, if I'm going to have faith in the scriptures and they tell me that God is everywhere present, that this moment is always perfect, I got to start thinking about that. So the moment is rarely perfect for a body. Okay, I must not be a body. Well, how do I know that? Well, in the same way that you're not in that movie, but you're weeping for the situation, in the same way you've moved into this body and identified with it and its narrative. That's one way of looking at it. You can go to the dream. This you that has the history that you've got right now, whatever that is, has the body that you've got right now, whatever that is, has the mind that you've got right now. It drops into the dream and it leaves this body, right? And it takes another body in the dream seamlessly. You've renounced everything. That's how you know that you are grand renouncers. We like to say renunciation's hard, but every night you drop into a dream and you renounce everything about this life effortlessly. You give up your memories, you give up your job, you give up your family, you give up your body, you give up your narrative, you give up everything and enter into a completely new situation, and you accept it painlessly. Fine. Now I'm an ant. Of course I'm an ant. I'm climbing up a flower. Of course I am. Right? And you accept that as real. And then when you wake up in the morning, you renounce all of that, every last bit of it. And now you're back to the continuation of yesterday's memories, right? And since you have access to those memories, you give it a sense of continuity, even though there was no continuity, because your memories have no reality whatsoever. They're no more real than anything. You can't show anybody them. You can't re-experience them. You say, oh, but I can remember them. Well, if you remember them, they're no longer in the past, so they're not memories. They're now part of your present, right? And they're a lens through which you are observing what's happening and coming up with your confusion. So with all of that, we're going to jump into verse 12 here. And this is going to talk about Atman. Now, interestingly enough, Atman, it can be a couple of things. Of course, it can be the particular and it can be the whole simultaneously. That's the experience of the dream, right? In the dream, you are the whole dream, but you're also the particular in that dream. And incidentally, you're also the experience of the dream, because the experience of the dream is just a series of thoughts, right? You're not really touching the ocean in your dream. It's just the thought of touching the ocean that gives you the experience of touching the ocean in your dream. Same thing climbing the mountain, same thing, everything in the dream. Everything in that dream is only a thought, right? Because nothing in that dream is what it is. The ocean's not there, the waves aren't there, the sky is not there, the people aren't there, the beach isn't there, the mountains aren't there. And yet they appear to be. And all of it is Atman, right? And when you take all of that, when you go behind what it's appearing to be, you come up with dream stuff, or what we call Brahman, that which is everything, that which has no form and can take form, can take any form, outside of time, inside of time. It can be all of those things and beyond it. There's no limitation to it. So he says the knowledge of this cannot be attained by speech. Right? I can't tell you what it is, because if I was to describe this room as Atman, I would have to be able to describe every single atom and beyond down to, and beyond even what you can think of is in this room. There's an infinity in here. It's not just molecules and atoms. It's all the way down to particles and waves, and even beyond that, things we don't even know. I would have to be able to somehow fit the totality of all of this into a sentence. Can't be done. It doesn't stay within time, right? In your dream, you have the illusion of time. It turns out that time is really just the rate of thinking. That's what gives you the weight that the thoughts occur to you, is what gives you the sense of time, the change in the rate of the thoughts that appear. You can find that out when you try your meditation. When you have a good meditation, you by necessity experience your eternity. You step outside of time. Because if you've had a good meditation, you close your eyes, you have your good meditation, you open them, and 2 hours have passed. And you're like, ooh, that was a great meditation. That felt like 30 seconds. That was spectacular, right? But if you close your eyes and the mind is a mess, you got lots of thoughts happening, time passes slowly. And you sit and what you think is 2 hours, and you open your eyes and it's been 7.5 minutes. And you're like, oh, I hate meditation. You know? And so you define it as such. So Atman cannot be attained by speech, because speech has subject, object, verb, and Atman cannot be defined that way, because it's all the verbs, it's all the objects, and it's outside of time. So you can't possibly break it into subject, object, verb. It cannot be attained by the mind, because the mind needs not only subject, object, verb if you think verbally, it also needs time, space, causation, right? Because the mind processes the singularity that it's in through 5 senses, and assigns time, space, and causation as fundamental assumptions about it. And if you are experiencing only a sliver of Atman, that's not the entirety of Atman. If you can only experience one moment at a time, that's not the singularity. If you can only see it from one perspective at a time, that's not the singularity, right? You aren't everything all at once, everywhere. So it can't be held by the mind or by the eye, right? Well, you can see that. In a dream, you've got an eye that sees everything. Where is it? You know, where is that eye? It can't be it can't be objectified, is the thing, right? It can't be placed in front of you. You can see, it can become something, and that something can be placed in front of you. But at that point, you're not aware of its Atman nature, you're aware of its objective nature, that it takes a form and a moment and presents itself to you. But you can't capture it with the senses. And so this is the magic of a great meditation. A great meditation is when you haven't objectified anything. You've gone inside, and you've become aware of awareness in a great meditation. You become aware of the watcher of your mind. So you're not paying any attention at all to what the mind, what the watcher is looking at. You're paying attention to the watcher itself. And the watcher itself has no attributes. It's not going to appear in front of the senses, because it is the one that is using the senses, that's looking through the senses, right? So it can't be caught by the eye. How can it be realized in any other way than by the affirmation of him who says he is, right? So that component of you, when you sit here and think, if you do the homework of trying to find the one thought that you can have that is not dependent on any other thought, the only thought that you have that is not relative is what? Anybody know? It's the opposite of what Descartes says. I am. That is the only thought that you can have that does not need any other thought to support it. It's your isness, your I am, and incidentally the name of God, which is you repeat endlessly through your life without any awareness. I'm hungry. Who's hungry? I am. Right? I am hungry. So Indirectly, you said God is hungry without any awareness of that at all, right? I'm angry. Who is? I am. The name of God again.
Is that because that's what God said to Moses when he met him? That's where that's coming from.
Who shall I say sent me? I am that I am. I am has sent you. So this isness. So we're aware of our divinity. We reference it all the time. Every sentence that we talk about ourselves, we use God's name to describe, to begin that sentence, which is quite a wonderful thing. And so how can it be realized another way than by the affirmation of him who says he is? So who within you is using the mind to say, I am? Who is it that exerts its existence? You can't know it any other way but than affirmation, because you can't put it in the mind because it's observing the mind. You can't put it in the body because it's observing the body. There is nothing that you can do to separate from your I am in order to study it. And so all you can do is affirm it. I am. And stay with that thought. And Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says that's all that's necessary for realization, is to just be constantly aware of your I am and never fall into the story, never believe the movie. So sit in your chair in the cinema, watch that movie, and never, never take your eyes or your awareness of the white screen off of the white screen. Stay aware of the white screen behind the color for the whole thing. You will not fall into the movie and its narrative and be pulled into its story of particularity. And you won't earn the $15 you would have if you had fallen into the movie and created it yourself. So he says, Atman cannot be attained by speech, by the mind, by the eye. How can it be realized in any other way than simply by the affirmation of him who says he is? So whatever that is, that knows its own existence, is the only thing that's real. Everything else is dancing in front of it and doesn't ever really exist. I like the thought that you can either believe in the past and the future, or you can believe in the moment, but you can't believe in both, right? Because if you have a past and a future, at what time is the future present before it becomes the past? No matter how fine you make that sliver, it's an instantaneous passing. So if you have a past and a future, you by declaration, by inference, cannot have a moment, right? That future is never the present. And that past obviously is never the future, never the present either. And so you can only know the moment. And the thing with the moment is that you cannot find its beginning and you cannot find its end. That is how infinity is represented in the finite, right? This moment that has no beginning and no end. Incidentally, that's when Vivekananda makes a very fun statement. He says, the reason everything goes in circles, everything is in cycles in the finite, because that's the only way that the beloved could come up with something that has no beginning and end. So that's why the planets circle the sun and why the sun circles the center of the galaxy, why the electrons fly around the center. Everything goes in circles to represent the infinity inherent in it by going in a place that has no beginning and no end. So he is to be realized first as existence, limited by upadhis, and then in his true transcendental nature. Of these two aspects, Atman realized as existence leads the knower to the realization of his true nature. Right? So existence limited by upadhis. The way you can talk about that is that there is only one oh boy, we're already at a bump. There's only one isness in this room, right? There's not multiple isnesses in this room. There's one is in here. And that is being pushed through from the back. This common is that is all of us, the I am that is common to all of us, is a singularity. There's not multiple, there's a single one of them, but it gets pressed through this set of limitations and restrictions that your body and your mind have. So it gets pressed through these limitations and restrictions, and those can come in a variety of forms. The form of the body is its own restriction. The definition of its hardware and software is part of that restriction. Its age, all of that, all of these attributes that you have. And then, of course, the attributes of the mind also. So it gets pressed through all of these limitations. It goes in as the I am and comes out with your name on the front-hand side. Right, and that's how these great swamis who look at you and suddenly seem to know what's going on in you, seem to be able to tell everything about you. That's why, because they know the knower. They know what's in the back, and they can observe what's in the front, and they know what it's gone through to become that. They can see it quite clearly. They can tell the whole story of how that becomes this. That's cool. Just the right time. So, so that's what it is, that this existence, this I am, is broken into multiple pieces, first of all, by the senses. You know, the singularity that we're observing, the oneness, is broken into 5 pieces. So already we're in trouble, just by the fact we have 5 senses. We break God into 5 disparate pieces, and then it goes into the mind, and the mind looks at that and is like, oh my gosh, what is this? Right? And it takes that information, it just starts putting in boxes, like, okay, that goes there, that goes there. Oh, wait, there's a similarity. Those things are alike in this way, and they're different in this way. And what is the mind really trying to do? The mind is trying to create the singularity by using relativity. It's taking these 5 moments, 5 pieces of information that's coming in constantly every moment, putting them in their places in the mind, trying to find how they're all related to each other so that it can come up with the idea of the whole, of the one without a second, which it's doing a terrible job at, you know, because it will never have an infinity of information to deal with. And even if it did, it still has a singular perspective from which to look at it. And so you're kind of lost in it. And so you give up that. You step out of the mind and its busy work. You step out of the flow of information coming in from the body. And for a moment, you have some absolute silence. Not a silence of emptiness, but a silence of the potential of everything. Unrealized, you know, unmanifested. And in that moment, in that silence, the I am still exists and knows its own nature, because nothing is telling it what it is. Now it knows of its own accord what it is. It's no longer referencing the mind, tell me who I am, tell me what I am. It's not asking the body, tell me who I am, tell me what I am. Right? Finally, it shuts all of those things up. It doesn't go anywhere to ask who it is, and it knows. But the trouble is, what it knows can't fit back into the mind and back into the body, so it can't tell anybody. Or in the words of Ramakrishna, I wanted to tell you what was there, but Mother was standing on my tongue. There's no way that it can be said, that it can be expressed. There's no way that it can fit into the mind. So Atman realized, which means awareness, sub-awareness, before the limitations, before it's pressed through the mind and body, leads the knower to the realization of his true nature. When awareness becomes aware of itself with no interspatial limitation and restriction, with no lost identity, then it simply knows, because it is what it is. It doesn't have to be told. It's its own self that it becomes aware of. When all the desires that dwell in the heart fall away, then the mortal becomes immortal and here attains Brahman. Right? So when desires that dwell in the heart fall away, so your attachment of, I'm not going to use the word attachment, your identity with body, because you really do think you're the body, right? We talk that way. When the body's sick, we say, I'm sick. When the body's tired, we say, I'm tired. So we totally believe the body to be ourself. But we know for sure, especially as Vedantins, that we're the observer of the body. The body has to report to you. So you inherently know that you are not the body. But for some reason, you keep ignoring that. You keep letting go of that because you're terrified. And the ego needs the body in order to exercise its illusion of control. So it won't let go. And the mind is the same. You know, clearly, we think we're the mind. The mind gets angry, I'm angry. You know, the mind is lonely, I'm lonely. And so through that identity, we experience things that have nothing to do with us as our own experience, right? Just like in the dream. In the dream, those things in that dream have nothing to do with you, that self that can be either in the waking body or in the dream body. Those things are not related to that self. They're related to that particular perspective that the self has assumed at that point, but they're not related to the self, because the self is everything in the dream, because the self in its true nature is the dreamer and not the dreamed. And so realization is living the dream with the knowledge that you are the dreamer, that the dream is within you. Alameda is within me. I am not in Alameda, right? You in actuality are the dreamer, and the dream is inside of you. You are not the dreamed in the dream. And so this is coming to that understanding. So we hear this universe exists within us. We are not in it. We have arbitrarily chosen a point of perspective for whatever reason and experienced the wholeness through this point. And it has unfolded as the narrative that you're experiencing in this moment. This moment is the sum total of your desires that have conditioned the limitations through which you are expressing yourself. And you believe it to be you. So he says, when all the ties of the heart, or when the desires that dwell in the heart fall away. So when all of that attachment, those things that you've grabbed and stored, when you're willing to drop your memory, drop all of the things that you've attached to, drop all of the lessons about who you are out of the mind, let go of the idea of past altogether. When those fall away, you're no longer looking at the moment through the lens of your attachments. You're seeing it as it is. And what happens when we look at Ramakrishna? What happens? You go into samadhi. The beauty, the wonder, the wisdom, the love that become apparent in this I am, this isness, blow out everything else. Mind is overwhelmed, body is overwhelmed, and all that there is to experience is the self, the I am. And at that point, you know, you experience your center as, what do they say about God? We are a center with an infinite radius. God is infinite centers with infinite radius. And so when we have a moment of samadhi, to try and describe something that's not going to be described, but to give a pointer to it, it is when you place your point of perspective in every single possible point within the dream. And it goes back to our understanding that then there is no narrative, there is no movement. You see all possibilities, you see all stories at once. Nothing unfolds because everything is, and you know it. So there's no place for a narrative. It's taking your movie and, I always like to take the idea of a movie and cutting all the frames into their little squares and stacking those squares all the way up. So that is realization. When you see all of the possibilities, all of the decisions, everything all at once. And then to experience the movie, you take yourself and identify with a drop of consciousness. You let go of it, and that drop of consciousness falls through your stack of frames one by one. And that which is unchanging, unmoving, absolute, then becomes particularized, tells a narrative and a story. You believe yourself to have free will because you don't know what's coming, and you fall through and experience the story of being. Now take one movie and make an infinite number of them, and that gives a closer story of what you are in your reality. So when the desires that dwell in the heart fall away, then the mortal becomes immortal and here attains Brahman, right? So you have all thoughts at once. There's no longer a sequence of thoughts to create the illusion of time. You are now eternal, which is not a long time. It just means outside of time. There is no time. And if you think you're going to know what that means, it's going to give you a headache because your mind requires time to conceive of something. You can't conceive of it without time, space, and causation. When all the ties of the heart are severed here on earth, then the mortal becomes immortal. This much alone is the teaching. There are 101 arteries in the heart, one of which pierces the crown of the head. Going upward by it, a man at death attains immortality. But when his prana passes out by other arteries going in different directions, then he is reborn in the world. So when you've got these, the easiest way to think about this, the summary of this in my own mind. So this is, yes, ma'am.
Can you say that?
Yes.
I was going to ask the same question.
Right. Okay. There are 101 arteries of the heart, one of which pierces the crown of the head, going upward by it. A man at death attains immortality, but when his prana passes out by other arteries going in different directions, then he is reborn in the world. Okay. Now this is, I think Patanjali probably is, that builds on this idea, with the chakras and the bringing the energy up, and Thakur talks about bringing it out the crown of the head. All that stuff you kind of need to maintain that whole story to understand it. So it becomes an understanding of a story within the understanding of a story within the understanding of the story. As this has been digested in this heart, I'm just going to share this as an idea, not as a teaching, because this is my own digestion of this idea. When you die, there's these NDEs, these near-death experiences. This is why this isn't an official teaching. But when in these near-death experiences, a significant percentage of people who have this near-death experience walking through a tunnel toward a light, and there at the end of the tunnel in that light is usually like their grandfather or Jesus or love itself, or basically what I would assume would be the highest ideal of love as it is to you will stand in that light. Okay, what he's saying here, if you walk into this tunnel, walk toward this light, it is the divine light of consciousness where everything about your ego you is known, right? That collection of memories that you've got, that identity, all of your identities, the vectors of all of that. You're walking along, just imagine walking along, you're stark naked, and not only is your body stark naked, but your mind is stark naked also. Every secret is revealed. Everything that you've ever done is in plain sight. Every secret thought that you've had, every intention you've ever had, it's all plainly visible. If you can walk directly in that light and not flinch, not flinch at all, you'll have your moksha. If at any moment you flinch, you get embarrassed, you get afraid, you get insecure, you reach for something to take refuge in, that's your next birth. You go through one of the other arteries before going through the top of the crown of the head to your moksha. You grab onto some element for having to do with any of these arrangements of chakras and characteristics. You grab something for security. And so there's only two ways to walk directly into that all-revealing light without flinching. One of them is to live a perfect life, which is required of the Gyanis, to be able to hold that pure note and know, not that, not that, not that, all of your things that you want to grab. Nope, 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 bingo. There used to be one of the brahmacharis used to say, Om Ram, bingo, finished, right? And you get to the top. But if you grab to the side, then you're out. And so the other possibility is to have such a confidence in the nature of that light as pure love. If you have such an absolute confidence in the grace of that pure love, that you know that there is no responsibility being held accountable for everything that is appearing. You basically have withdrawn your identity from happenings, from memories, from events, from descriptions, from all the senses, from all of that, because in grace you've put this wonderful colored jacket on, and you walk with confidence into the light, thinking nothing about what the delusion you had about what you were and what you'd done. You think only about the love of the beloved and the infinite love that he has for you, and you take refuge in the light itself. And then you Om Ram Bingo finish that way. So there's two options: live that perfect life, or come to know the absolute grace of the beloved. Did someone raise a hand on the left here? No. Okay. The Purusha, not larger than a thumb, the inner self, always dwells in the hearts of men. Let a man separate him from his body with steadiness, as one separates the tender stalk from a blade of grass. Let him know that self as bright as the immortal, yea, as bright as the immortal. So this is just pulling out that Purusha, that energy, that isness. That's pure love, according to Vivekananda, that love is the only motivating force of the universe. It is the energy, it is the existence, it is everything that changes is motivated by that pure, unadulterated love. And if you can know yourself to be that with steadiness, that you are not at all this body, you are not at all this mind, which means you have no limitations and you have no story, you have no karma, right? Your karma is what is held in the mind, right? It's you believing that you were the doer, and the mind holds you accountable to that as it draws its assumptions about past, present, and future. And that's why Mother says, God's grace is easily attained, but the grace of one's own mind is difficult indeed to attain, right? So it's not God that's holding you to your karma. It's you holding yourself to your karma because you believe you did it, because you believe that you're the mind that conceived it, and you believe that you're the body that acted it out. And so because of that, you suffer. If you could let go of that, most of your suffering would end. If you could let go of either one of those, both of those things there. And it's not larger than a thumb, it just sits right in here. I often think that's where the shrine of the heart is. That's where the infinite becomes the finite, where God of no limitation takes on limitation and expresses as you. It's your name. And it's just this little fountain that's constantly flowing, the fountain of the absolute unchanging, somehow coming through into the changing unabsolute. This continuous, unrepeating flow of change. But if you can know the self as the bright, right, the light of consciousness, the light of awareness, the light of love, all of which are synonyms. If you can know the self as that, as the immortal, outside of time, not a matter of causation, not trapped within that cycle, right, of time, space, and causation. Really, we know that time, is indicative of mind, right? Because that's what it belongs to by the rate of thinking, creating time, and space, the limitation of the body, right? The body appears as a limitation in space. So you know yourself not to be body, not to be mind, but rather as the immortal light, the immortal consciousness, the immortal love, the immortal being of God, as the immortal, having received this wisdom taught by the King of Death and the entire process of yoga, Nachiketa became free from impurities and death and attained Brahman. Thus it will be also with any other who knows in this manner the inmost self. Right? So through this process of yoga, of all these experiences summed up, of trying to find your fulfillment, trying to figure out who you are, trying all of the possible avenues of the particular descriptions of love, as it were, almost as if your life right now is like a single story of what love looks like when it's pressed through this particular set of limitations and restrictions. And then you are a story of love pressed through that set of limitations and restrictions. And you're the story of love pressed through that set of limitations and restrictions. Go on till you get 7 billion people in the world. And you add all those together into a single cable of strings of stories of what love looks like when pressed through different conditions and circumstances. When you have finally tried all of those, summed them all up, learned the lesson, you then have the sum total of what love looks like in every possibility of limitation and restriction. And if you've done that, that's what you have to do. I don't know this for sure, but if you have no sadhana ever, you'll have to try every single one of those strings before you come to the right conclusion. You just keep going and keep going and keep going. But sadhana, you can clip it out and get an idea and then start not having to go through all possible experiences. But through the process of yoga, so through the process of following this path, doing your practice, going to the beloved, throwing yourself at the mercy of the Divine Mother, and through that love, getting her permission to short circuit all of these possibilities, then you can attain, you first of all, you're free from impurities, which means your karma drops because you're not particularly identified anymore. You're free from death because the body is no more, and you know that you are immortal. And you've attained Brahman. And what is Brahman? Brahman is the infinite potential of all things simultaneously. You can bring that into the dream world. It is the substance of the mind, big quotes, that have become everything in your dream. That mind stuff that represents an ocean in your dream, an experienceable ocean, not just a look-alike ocean, an experienceable ocean in your mind. That Brahman, which becomes the mountain in your mind, which becomes the people in your mind, and plays the dream, that substance, which you can't really call it a substance because you can't find a boundary to it, because everything in the dream is made of it. That means the air between you and the mountain 150 miles away in your dream is made of Brahman, the same mind stuff, this dream substance. All of the grass in there, all of the people, everything in there is just one solid block. If you turned Brahman blue, everything in your dream would be just one solid block of blue in an infinite direction, in all directions, right? Because the dream is not limited by space. You can view mountains that are 150 miles away, but they're still between your ears. So it has this infinite potential to be anything, anywhere, at any time. That's a way of taking the pincers of the mind and grabbing Brahman. But then you have to say, and more, at the end of it, just to be sure that you don't think that you have fit Brahman between your ears. Right? And that is what Nachiketas comes to know and finds his freedom, his lack of limitation. And what is freedom? Freedom is to have no desire. All of the desires flowing from the heart have ceased, have been let go of. You have no desires. Why? Because now you are in perfect balance. You have no lack. There's nothing necessary. There's pure contentment in a nature of love, wisdom, and being. You've moved from the verb of love and become love itself. You've moved from the verb of existence and become existence itself. You've moved from the verb of wisdom and become wisdom itself. And I think that might be the summary of the Katha Upanishad. And all of this is happening while you're waiting in death's waiting room. Sitting here tonight, waiting for your body to drop. That's where it's happening. Any questions or concerns? ideas.
Speechless.
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 Well, that's one step. All right. Good for you.
That question.
Uh-huh.
Is it possible to leave the body consciously unless you are a really great yogi like Swami Vivekananda? Because most of the people, at least a few that I've seen leave the body, family members, they've always been not conscious. At the last moments of their life, they were given something, pain medicine, we don't know what. So is it possible for a yogi of a lower level, I guess, to leave the body consciously?
You can't really answer that question because, first of all, you don't have a body. You have the idea of a body. There's not actually a body there. You know, I'm not going to go through the story again. I'm too embarrassed. But to understand that what you're seeing now is no different than the dream, right? Everybody knows why I say that, how we come to know that, right? Because the light stops at the back of your eye and then becomes information. So you're not experiencing this room, you're experiencing your mind's symbol of this room, even in your waking state. So it's the exact same setup as in the dream. It's not exactly the same as the dream because the sages always say like a dream. They don't say it is, they say it's like a dream. So there's something different about this one. But from our experience of it, it's still us seeing Brahman differentiated. We see the mind stuff differentiated into all of this, but it's all the same mind stuff, and that's of the nature of Brahman. So you really don't leave the body. I mean, leave the body. Yeah, you leave the dream. You leave the entire illusion. Now, if you want to go halfway and say, can I pull my particular out of this body and put it into the air above my head for a moment? Sure. But to do that, you have to be very keenly aware that you're dreaming. And if you're keenly aware that you're dreaming, then you are in charge of the dream. And so you can take any perspective, not just leave this body, but enter any other body or any other sphere, or whatever you want to do. Anything experienced is going to be within the dream. And you can be any of that. And you can experience being any of that with your chosen particular. But if you're talking about really leaving the body, there's nowhere to go. You're everywhere present. And so there's nowhere to go. You're under your particular is everywhere. So yes and no. Yes, but not in a true sense, because there is no body. You can leave the thought of your body. That's the best you can do. All right. Very good.
So is there, because the self-effort, that's what I wanted to ask, there is a self-effort, right?
There is the story of the mind that you have identified with, yes. That you hold yourself accountable to. But in the end, there's no doer. If you don't have a doer, where's your effort?
But that comes only when you transcend the...
When you have stopped believing the story that your ego is telling you, and you've stopped, which includes the fact that you are in this body, and this body is in the dream. When you come to know that neither of those are true, then there's still no effort because you're still just being yourself. Nothing changes. Realization is not a change. It's just knowing, transcending an imagined limitation. So it's like when you wake up from the dream, is that because of something? We can create a story where it is, but that something isn't in the dream necessarily. It's not something in the dream that woke you up. but something woke you up. So that question, I would say that from within the dream, there's no answering that question because the answer lies outside the dream. And it's not going to be causation, but definitely something seems to wake you up, right? But like Ramakrishna sort of alludes, it's really you stop pretending to be asleep for whatever reason. But yeah, no, if we're not the doer, there's no karma and there's no effort necessary. And that's the reality. Swami Ramakrishna says how many times in the gospel, you're not the doer. You're not the doer, you're not the doer. So we can't make it a matter of self-effort. That's why I say it's grace only. Grace is inexplicable and unearned. Grace is outside of time, space, causation. And it's grace that allows us to wake up. What's the nature of that? It's somehow the removal of the idea of karma. Somehow the removal of the story that you're enthralled by for some reason at this moment. Inexplicable. Why in the dream, if it's all you, why are you running from the army behind you? But in the dream, you're running. And the only way to, you're going to have to fight that war, that would be self-effort. But in reality, you just come to know you're dreaming, you just turn around and be like, huh. Yeah. So that's another weird answer for a weird question.
Why did Vivekananda is talking about all other non-Christian that you have to go through either bhakti mark, karma mark, jnana mark. So you have to do that bhakti mark, you have to do that karma mark, or you have to do that jnana mark, either of these or all of them. So who is doing that?
What's being done? In the dream, you build a house. Is there a house? There's no house. So no, he is appearing in your dream to try and get you to let go of your wrong assumption that none of this is real. That's why, Jesus says, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, get up and throw yourself into the sea. We hear that, and it's Jesus, for some people that means something that Jesus said. If Ramakrishna would say the same thing, because he was Jesus at one point. It's like he would say that yes, you can take if you have faith the size of mustard seed, you can do anything you want in the dream, but you don't have faith the size of the mustard seed. You don't believe it. And so he creates a story that you can adopt to help lead you out of your own current story that isn't taking you to freedom. He can lead you into a story that will lead to faith the size of a mustard seed, that will lead to the possibility of seeing that this is your dream, that you're sleeping. Sri Nisargadatta is a wonderful, I got chills the first time I read this. The questioner says to him, look, you're realized and I'm not. I'm sitting right here next to you. Isn't there anything that you can do? Can't you help me, to experience or to see what you're seeing? And Nisargadatta smiles and leans forward and looks at him and says, I am. I have appeared in your dream, and I'm telling you that you are sleeping, right? But no one can make the man believe that he's sleeping. So you're in the dream. Ramakrishna comes to you in the dream and says, you're sleeping. And you're like, what do you mean I'm sleeping? I'm sitting right here in this chair. I'm not sleeping, right? Because Sri Nisargadatta makes a further statement at one point when that same questioner says to him, how come you're realized and I'm not realized? What's the difference between us? And he says, there's only one difference. When my teacher whispered in my ear that thou art that, I believed him. You thought you still had something to learn. That's the only difference. So at some point, you're just going to have to try so many things that you've exhausted yourself and you give up at the fundamental level. You find that infinite humility of I simply can't do anything. And at that point, you get grace, because the requirement of infinite grace is infinite humility. And if you don't have that, you can't accept grace, because you'll still believe that it's something you have to do. You still believe that there's a possibility that you can play. A third thing that Sri Nisargadatta says, he says, when a realized soul is playing chess with God, his first move is to lay his king down. The ignorant soul playing chess with God will believe that he has a first move. Right? So these are all hints at it. You aren't there because you won't let yourself be there, because you believe that you're the doer and you haven't earned it. You won't allow yourself to be free of the things you've done because you believe you're guilty of them. As soon as you stop believing you're guilty of the things that you've done, you'll be able to have that faith the size of the mustard seed. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Until then, you have to follow your own story, and you create the story in real time. I always use the example of the one I hear the most in question and answer periods. People always start off their question, meditation is so hard for me. My mind is so noisy. What do I do? Right? You hear that all the time. They just wrote their story, because every time they sit down to meditate, what are they going to think? This is so hard and my mind is so noisy. And that will be the story. They have to live it. That's why Vivekananda says, say ever I am free. Say that I am beloved of God. Say that I've never been born and I have never died. Repeat it again and again and again and again until that becomes your story, and walk out of the dream. But you're writing your story in real time by believing in time, space, and causation. That's why karma yoga is all about bringing yourself into the moment, bring yourself into this one frame. Stop, let go of all the hypnotization of the ego that has explained this moment to you, why it's here and how it got like this. Stop it. Understand that Sri Nisargadatta says that every moment the universe is newly recreated. There is no such thing as cause and effect. What you call cause and effect is merely repetition. Right? Come to that space. Be in this moment. Let go of the story, let go of the projections, be 100% here, and you can see the nature of the moment. If you sit in meditation and you come to that null space of no past, no future, or no thought, what you instantly become aware of is a beautiful sense of bliss that has always been there, no cause. Outside of time, you're free from time, you're free from causation, and you're in a state of bliss, a state of contentment. Nothing is necessary. It's actually the bliss that you feel every time you fulfill a desire. When you fulfill a desire, you have a brief moment there where the mind is without desire. And in that brief moment that the mind is without desire, you become aware of your inherent bliss, and you blame it on the fulfillment of the desire. But in fact, it was the state of no desire. But you only get to enjoy it for a very short time, because your mind immediately comes up with the next desire. And you're distracted once again from your own inherent bliss. I don't remember the name of the Swami, but it was one of our very old Swamis that came to San Francisco and was telling Swami Prabhupada that story. He said to Swami Prabhupada, oh, I have seen a very important thing about the nature of desire. And Swami Prabhupada, of course, ooh, what is that? It was a very wonderful thing to hear and watch. I was sitting there, just the brahmacharya. What's going on? Look at these giants talk. And then he said, I've noticed that when a desire is filled, I feel my inherent bliss, and I blame it on the desire being fulfilled. But really, it was because for a moment after fulfilling a desire, you're without a desire. And in that brief moment, you become aware of your divine nature for just a moment. And you feel that wonderful bliss. And then the desire is instantly replaced with another one. And you're once again distracted from your nature. And so it goes round and round and round it goes.
Swami, one more, if you have time, I
What?
think I'm not going to.
Do I have
It's
time?
1:45.
Okay. I'm going to let you guys go online and I'm going to change locations over to the One Spirit link